Past midnight, in a narrow room above a London square, a woman named Esther Vane unpicks a silk border stitch by stitch. She does not sigh. She threads the needle. She washes the loosened silk in cool water, dries it flat, and sews it back before dawn by candlelight, a brass lens held to the light. A third season, squeezed from one gown. Her hands know the work. No one knows her hands. At Lady Crale's dinner for 40, a marchioness leans close and admires the gown. Lady Crale smiles. She only dresses her betters, she says. The table laughs. Esther stands at the wall, uncredited, holding the fan. But one man at that table is not looking at the gown. The Duke of Ravensmere is watching the maid's hands. And he does not look away. If you've ever been judged by your dress instead of your heart, this story is for you. Before we go on, subscribe and comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. Now let me tell you about Esther Vane. She was the daughter of a Huguenot laceworker. Her father kept an atelier on Wardour Street, drawing lines that came from nothing, ahead of the Paris plates. Then the atelier failed. Debt took the presses. Debt took the house. At 15, Esther entered service, £6 a year, with the uniform deducted before the wage was ever paid. She slept in a small chamber that adjoined her mistress's own, close enough to hear a bell, close enough to hear everything. That was the point of her. A maid within call, at all hours, who saw the household undressed and said nothing. 19 years passed that way. 19 years of pins. Consider one ordinary day. 6 changes of dress between morning and midnight. A walking gown, a carriage gown, a gown for calls, a gown for dinner. Behind a single evening coiffure sat 20 pins, wire frames, and pads of horsehair, and Esther could build the whole tower and take it down again in under 40 minutes. She could do it with her eyes half shut. She could do it while Lady Crale complained. Esther was competent. She was uncredited. And, God help her, she was resigned. She believed her invisibility was a fact about herself, the way her eyes were grey. She did not yet understand that it was a rule, and that a rule is something a person chooses to enforce. That is the thing to hold on to. It matters later. Under her cot there was a locked deal box. Plain wood, an iron hasp, a small key she wore on a cord. She never opened it for anyone. Nell, the under-housemaid, teased her about it once, elbowing her in the scullery. "What's in the box you never open?" Nell said. "A sweetheart's letters?" "Gold buttons," said Esther, and that was the end of it. It was not buttons. But we will come to the box. Let it sit there. Under the cot, in the dark. Now, there was a house party that autumn at Wexcombe, a great seat in Wiltshire. Lady Crale was invited, which meant Esther was carried along like a trunk. And it was at Wexcombe, on the back stair, at 2 in the morning, that the first thing happened. Esther was mending. A guest had torn a flounce, and it had to be right by breakfast. She sat on the cold step with her mother's brass loupe, the little magnifying lens, held up to catch the candle. She did not hear the footstep. A man came down the stair in the dark in his shirt-sleeves and stopped. It was the Duke. Neither of them spoke. Her thimble slipped from her lap and rang on the stone. He bent for it the same instant she did. His glove, no, his bare hand and her bare hand came within a centimetre of each other in the dark, not touching, only near. Near enough that she felt the warmth of him before she drew back. He set the thimble on the step between them. She said, "Thank you, sir," to the floor, because a maid does not look a duke in the face. He went up the stair, and it was only after folding her work away that she found the thimble gone. He had kept it. She told herself she had lost it. Both things were a lie by half. Back in London, the offences grew bolder. Lady Crale had a habit that turned Esther's stomach. Every gown Esther recut and made new, Lady Crale paraded as a fresh purchase from a French house. "My Paris line," she called it, waving a hand, and when Esther was in the room, her mistress looked through her, or worse, spoke past her as if she were a coat stand. There was a rule of the house, too, no followers. No young man might call, might walk out, might so much as tip his hat to a maid of Lady Crale's. A maid belonged to the house entire. And under all of it ran a thing Esther alone understood. There was an account. Messrs. Thackeray and Poole, drapers, held £240 of Lady Crale's, unpaid. It fell due at Whitsun quarter day. £240 the Crales did not have. Every gown Esther saved, every yard she did not need to buy, was the thin thread holding the whole house back from ruin. Esther held the family's secret in her needle. And no one thanked her for it, because no one was meant to know she knew. Then came the night of the heirloom gown. A cousin of Lady Crale's, a girl of 17, was to be presented at court in her grandmother's gown. Old point lace. Priceless, and the evening before, a careless candle set a scorch across the bodice, and a hot iron split the seam. The girl wept. Lady Crale, for all her airs, was helpless. She could give orders, she could not sew. They came to Esther at 11 at night with the ruined thing in their arms. Esther worked until dawn. She had a printed plate, and the loupe, and her mother's memory of how the old lace was pieced. She lifted the good lace off the burned ground. She built a new bodice under it. She reset the seam so the scar vanished. When the girl put it on at 9, she looked like a portrait, and she never knew how close she had come to disgrace. Lady Crale accepted the compliments as her own. "One does what one can for family," she said. Esther slept 2 hours and rose to dress her mistress for the day. And then the season opened. This is the part I want you to see clearly. The Thorn Ball. Candles by the thousand, the whole ton in one hot, glittering room, and everywhere the murmur, Lady Crale's Paris line, so fine, so new, wherever did she get it? Esther stood at the wall in her plain grey, holding a shawl, invisible as furniture. Then the room shifted. A path opened in the crowd. The Duke of Ravensmere crossed the whole length of the ballroom, past marchionesses, past his own approved match, Lady Honoria Thorne, and he stopped in front of the maid at the wall, and he spoke to her. Directly, as to a person. "You mended the flounce at Wexcombe," he said. "I never thanked you." The room saw it. That was the thing. The room saw a duke speak to a servant as though she were a guest, and the room did not know where to put its eyes. Lady Honoria's smile went thin as wire. Lady Crale's face flushed a mottled red. Esther felt every gaze land on her at once, and it was not warmth, it was judgment. She curtsied and said nothing, and wished the floor would take her. He bowed, and moved away, and the whispering that followed her out was a new and colder kind. The next morning the housekeeper found her. "You were seen," she said, low and hard. "You will not be seen again. Do you understand me, Vane? Whatever it takes. Never again." And here is what Esther did, and it will tell you everything about where she still was. She took her own Sunday gown, her one good dress, and she took it in at the seams, so it sat badly on her. She made herself plainer on purpose. She stitched the rule into her own clothes with her own hand, so that no eye would ever catch on her again. The order to be invisible, made real in thread. That was the low place. Pain, and under the pain, the beginning of something else. Because a woman who can make herself smaller has already understood that shape is a choice. The Duke understood things too. He returned the thimble to her, weeks later, pressed into her palm on a landing without a word. And he had noticed, this is what undid her, he had noticed that she never ate at balls, that she spent every ball in the retiring room, kneeling among torn hymns and fainting girls, mending, so one night he left a plate for her there. Cold chicken, a little bread, a glass. No note, just food set on the table where the maid worked by a man who was not supposed to know she existed. She ate it alone, and she cried, and she could not have told you why. Then Lady Beatrice came, the Duke's younger sister, 17 to be presented at court at Whitsun, and terrified of the gowns, of the eyes, of getting it wrong before the Queen. She slipped down to the retiring room one afternoon and found Esther, and she did not speak to her like a servant. She begged her. "They say you can make anything," Beatrice whispered. "Not copy a plate. Make it. Something no one has ever seen. Please, I'll pay from my own money. No one need know it came from you. No one need know it came from you." The old rule, in a kind girl's mouth. Esther went up to her narrow room that night and knelt by her cot. She took the cord from her neck, and for the first time in years she opened the locked deal box. Inside lay her mother's pattern book, lines drawn from nothing, a head of Paris in a dead woman's hand. Silhouettes no house in London had ever shown. Proof, in ink, of who Esther truly was. She turned the pages until dawn, and when the candle guttered, she had made a decision that no housekeeper's warning could hold. She would not copy a plate. She would design Lady Beatrice's gown herself, openly, from her mother's book, under her own hand, and she would stitch one small mark inside the seam. Her own, hidden, but hers. She would stop hiding what she made, even if it cost her the only place she had. She threaded the needle. Her hand was steady. And somewhere across the city, £240 came quietly due, and a duke turned a stolen thimble over in his pocket, and the whole bright ton slept without the faintest idea of whose hands were about to dress them all. The gown grew in stolen hours. Night after night, past midnight, Esther worked by the brass loop. She cut from her mother's lines. She sewed the mark inside the left seam, a small V, hidden where no one would look, her own hand, her own name, in a stitch. Nell watched the silhouette take shape and could not keep still. "It sits different," Nell whispered one dawn. "The waist, the fall of it. Nothing in the plates looks like that." "Then say nothing," Esther told her. "But maids talk. That is the whole trade below stairs." Nell carried the shape of it down the back way, and it went maid to maid, house to house, the way a candle lights a candle. A word here, a tuck copied there. Before Whitsun, the line was moving through the ton, and no one who wore it knew where it came from. Then, one grey morning, the Duke came. Esther was on her knees, pinning the hem while Beatrice stood on the stool. The light was thin. She did not hear the door. Esther, her name. Not you, not the maid. Her name in his mouth for the first time. She did not rise too fast. She held the pin between her lips. She took it out. She looked up, "Your Grace." That was all. 2 words each, but the air between them changed by a degree, the way ice cracks before it breaks. He looked at the gown. He looked at her hands. He knew then whose hands made the season. He said nothing more. He left. But the thing was said, and could not be unsaid. The trouble came 4 days before Whitsun. Lady Crale wanted her jewel case. She sent no one. She came herself, up to the narrow room, and she saw the deal box open on the cot. She saw the pattern book. She saw the gown, half finished, laid across the chair, and she saw, when she turned the seam, the small stitched mark that did not belong to her. "What is this?" Esther stood very straight. "My work, my lady." "Your work." Lady Crale's voice went flat and cold. "You have signed it, like a tradesman signs a bill." She turned the pages of the book with one gloved finger. "And these? Where did you steal these?" "They were my mother's. Nothing in this house is stolen but the credit for it." That landed. Lady Crale's face went white, then red. Because Esther knew. Esther had always known. The recuts, the turned hems, the third season squeezed from one gown, every thread of it hiding the truth. That there was no money. That, Messrs. Thackeray and Poole held £240 against the house, due at the Whitsun quarter day, and the arbiter of taste could not pay her draper. "You have been very useful," Lady Crale said at last. "You will not be useful here again. My lady, you are dismissed." Without a character. The words fell like a lock turning. Without a character. No letter. No reference. The permanent bar. No lady in London would take a maid turned off without one. It was not a dismissal. It was a burial. Esther did not weep. She folded her 2 spare aprons. She took the loupe. She took the deal box under her arm. She walked down the service stair, past Nell's stricken face, and out the door she had entered at 15, 19 years before. She had nowhere to go. She had the box, and the lens, and her mother's lines. She did not sigh. She threaded no needle. There was nothing left to mend but herself. Then Whitsun came, the 1 week of the year when all the world wears new clothes. Pentecost, the court presentation. The great houses emptied their wardrobes and put on their best, and the ton climbed the grand staircase at St. James's in their finery. And every third woman on that staircase wore Esther's line. The marchionesses wore it. Lady Honoria Thorne wore it, the waist high and clean, the fall exactly so, believing it Paris to the bone. Lady Crale wore it, a copy, stitched by a hurried hand, and swept up the stairs as though she owned the very shape of the season. At the top stood Lady Beatrice. 17, terrified no longer. She wore the original, the true gown from the true book, marked in the seam with a hidden V. And the room, when she entered, went quiet the way a room goes quiet before a queen. The Duke of Ravensmere stood near the foot of the stairs. He watched the line climb past him, copy after copy, and he knew every one for what it was. A fashionable modiste was there, a Wardour Street name, much sought that season. A duchess asked her plainly, "Where did you find this line? It is nowhere in the plates." And the modiste, who could not lie to a duchess, said, "I copied it, your grace, from a shape a girl brought me." A lady's maid, they said. Turned off without a character. The room heard it. The whole bright staircase heard it. The word went up the steps like water finding its level. A maid. It came from a maid, and there, halfway up, stood Lady Crale, in her copy of a copy, with every eye beginning to turn. Esther was in the hall. She had come, not to climb, she would never dare climb, but because Beatrice had begged it, had sent a footman to the door with a card in a child's round hand, "Come. Please, you made it. Be there." So she stood below stairs, at the servants' entrance to the great room. In her plain grey, the deal box still under her arm because she had nowhere to leave it and no one to leave it with. Lady Crale saw her. Cornered, with the room turning, she reached for the old weapon, the one that had always worked. "That woman," she said, loud, pointing down the stair, "she is a servant, a maid. She only dresses her betters." The line she had used at the dinner for 40. The line that meant, "She is beneath your notice. Know your place." The Duke stepped forward. He climbed 3 steps so all could see him. He held something in his hand, Beatrice's hem, drawn up, the seam turned out. And there, for the front rows to see, the small stitched mark. Then, "Madam," he said, and his voice carried to the top of the stair, "she has dressed every better in this room, and none of you knew it. Silence, absolute, this line you are all so proud of, this Paris shape." He let the seam fall. It did not come from Paris. It came from a back staircase, from a woman you turned out without a character for the crime of signing her own work. He turned to a footman. He called for pen and paper. And there, on the newel post of the staircase Esther had never been permitted to climb, before the marchionesses and the dukes and the Queen's own drawing-room beyond, he wrote her a character in his own hand. Esther Vane, he said as he wrote, modiste, in service 19 years. Honest, skilled beyond any in London, and shamefully used. He signed it. Ravensmere, let any house in England refuse her now, and Lady Crale, the arbiter of taste, the climber toward ducal circles, stood in her borrowed shape while a quieter word went round the room. £240. Thackeray and Poole. Unpaid, she had bought nothing. She had made nothing. She had dressed the whole season on a debt she could not settle, and a maid she would not credit. The staircase understood it all at once, the way a crowd does. She did not fall down the stairs. She simply stopped being someone anyone looked at. Which, for her, was the same thing. Later, when the drawing-room had emptied, the Duke found Esther in the retiring-room. The place she had always worked, the corner where she had mended flounces and eaten cold chicken alone while the ton danced. It was empty now, just the table and the low light, and the two of them. He took her hand, he opened her fingers, and into her palm he pressed the thimble, her thimble, kept these many months, turned over 1,000 times in a duke's pocket. I have watched you dress everyone but yourself, he said. I have watched you make the whole world beautiful from a corner where no one would look. I am done letting you sit in the corner. Esther looked at the thimble, at the hand that held hers. I am not asking for a maid, he said. I am asking for the woman. Stay, she thought of the word she had said all her life. Your Grace, my lady. Yes, my lady, the word that meant obedience. She turned it over, like the thimble, and made it mean something else. Yes, she said. Once, just that. He did not let go of her hand, and the door, for the first time in 19 years, was left open behind her. Years on, there is a house off a real street that bears her name. The Vane line, they call it, and the printed plates go out from her rooms now, not into them. The ton no longer summons her. The ton comes to her, and waits, and is grateful. There is a child of the house who plays at her feet in the workroom while she teaches. A young apprentice, all thumbs and hope, holds a lens up to the light and squints at a seam. Not so close, Esther tells her. Let the light come through it. See? The loupe does not hide the work, it shows it. The brass catches the morning. The same lens that once bent over a border at 2 a.m, in a narrow room, by a candle, so that no one would see the maid who saved the gown. It teaches openly now. In daylight. To a girl who will sign her own seams. A card came to the door not long ago. A caller's card, the ink a little worn, the name once grand. Lady Crale. The footman brought it in on a tray. Esther did not even set down her needle. Not at home, she said, and went on stitching. The hands that make the beauty are so often the last hands anyone looks at. Esther Vane spent 19 years being no one's hands but her mistress's. It took one man deciding to look, and then a whole room made to look, before the world learned her name. If you have ever been judged by your dress instead of your heart, I hope you know your hands are worth looking at too. Comment the city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story has travelled.